talk with Jim Walsh about this. He's an expert on international security at MIT and has testified before Congress about Iran's nuclear program. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Frederica.
All right, so before we talk about the nuclear program and what next, let's talk about this drone, this so-called ambassador of death. How might Iran use this? Why would they have this? They made it all in Iran?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One, it's not surprising that you get this sort of announcement this week because there's been a lot of talk about military strikes against Iran, and this is a way, at least in the battle of political rhetoric, for them to sort of push back a little. It remains to be seen how, functional, how useful this technology will turn out, whether it's any good or not. But you can understand why they would want it. Why do they want it? Because they don't have a good Air Force. And if they are attacked by Israel, if they are attacked by another country, and they want to retaliate, and they can't do it with their Air Force, then drones are, in theory, one technology that would give them a retaliatory capability.
So you see it more in use as retaliation, not in terms of a preemptive strike that Iran might plan, whether it be against Israel or anybody else.
No, if you look at the history of Iran since 1979, since the revolution, it has not been a country that has engaged in interstate war by attacking other countries. It was attacked by Saddam Hussein, and it responded to that. But it hasn't really, it may send the Quds force into Iraq, it may play with its intelligence services, but it hasn't started any wars.
And so apparently, or at least reportedly, there have been, I guess, some Russians involved in helping to protect the technology, whether it pertains to the drone or perhaps pertains to the nuclear powers of Iran. How might this be a protection for Iran against Israel?
Yeah, well, yesterday, when they opened up this plant, they also, on the same day, signed an agreement that would have Russian technicians continue working at that plant for the next 3 years. And I think that's probably a win-win for both the Iranians and the Russians. Why? Well, for the Iranians, it means that Israel is going to be very reluctant to attack that plant, which I don't think they would do anyway. I think we're way off the trail on that one. But if they were thinking about it, they wouldn't want to attack it if they were going to kill a bunch of Russian technicians who are inside the plant. And so Iran likes it for that reason. I think the Russians like it because they get to have eyes and ears on the ground watching the plant. And also, they don't want this plant to run into problems, to turn into a Chernobyl, because then that's going to hurt their ability to export nuclear plants in the future. So both the Russians and the Iranians get something out of it.
Okay. Meantime, there were some things said by John Bolton, who was a former UN envoy, and he talked about how Israel may be running out of time or may have already run out of time as it pertains to that nuclear plant. You take him to task on that. Why?
Well, these were impromptu remarks that I think were probably ill-considered. First of all, as I said before, there's no way Israel attacks a plant and kills a bunch of Russians. Why? For the past year, Israel has been trying to woo Russia because Russia is one of these members of the so-called P5+1, the group of countries that has been dealing with Iran. And Israel has been trying to get Russia to take a tougher position on Iran. You kill their engineers, you're probably not going to get what you're seeking. Secondly, the implication here is that this is a lost cause now, that there's no turning Iran around. That's not what the U.S. intelligence community has said, and said repeatedly over the last several years. Their finding is Iran has yet to make a command decision whether to build a nuclear weapon. It keeps building its capability, but it hasn't decided finally what it's going to do. So I think that's wrong. And frankly, the issue here is not the power plant. Lots of countries have power plants. It's enrichment. And that's where we need to keep our eye on the ball here and not be distracted by this other stuff. The key when it comes to proliferation is the enrichment technology, which they are already operating.
All right. Jim Walsh, thanks so much. So at this juncture, you say it really is not a significant worry. These are kind of new cogs in the wheel, but in terms of the U.S. or even neighboring countries, no significant worries need to take place as a result of the drone or even this nuclear plant.
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see whether the drone's any good, but they're not going to use it for offensive purposes. They'll use it for defense. And the plant, again, let's stay focused on the core issue. The core issue is enrichment. The Russians are going to be on the ground. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, is going to be on the ground. They're going to be watching that plant. The Russians are going to want to get the spent fuel out of there so that they can reprocess it. I really think it's small potatoes. It's a side issue.